Hey guys, this is Rob Paulson, and you're listening to the GeekCast Radio Network.
All right, welcome to episode 75 of the Cinema Geeks. That's right, because I don't know how to count, and last episode I called it 73, which in fact it was 74, which means we're now at 75. If anybody can keep that straight, you're smarter than I am. But we are on episode 75 of the Cinema Geeks. And today we have another special episode where we continue our half-decade countdown list. You've heard us do a whole bunch of different genre lists. Last month we brought you the top 10 actresses of the half-decade. And now we are finally at the top 10 actors of the half-decade, which means there's only one more list to go through, which will be our actual top movies of the half-decade, which will be coming later on this month. Joining me today, as always, is our whole group of Cinema Geeks. I am Optimus Solo. We also have Movie Revolt Dan. Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Not too bad. And the one and only Hard Candy Mandy. Hello.
What's up?
Not much. And as we have done with every single one of these half-decade countdown lists, we've reached out to try to find someone special to bring along that knows movies as well, if not more, than the three of us, and has definitely seen more movies than us, probably in the last year for sure. And that is from the In Session Film podcast, Brendan. Hello.
Greetings, gentlemen and lady.
And it's good to finally have you on, Brendan.
Yeah, I appreciate the invite, man.
Yeah, and it should be fun. We're going to be counting down, like I said, the top 10 actors, and how we define half-decade is 2010 to 2014. I don't know why some people find that confusing, but it's 5 years, so that's what we're looking at. Mm-hmm. So not necessarily counting 2015 that much. I mean, we might mention some movies that people have been in, but it wasn't a huge factor in us coming up with our rankings. Pretty straightforward. We'll just bounce back and forth giving you guys our picks. And then towards the end, we'll have a little bit of discussion of some honorable mentions in the way of maybe some people that are just on the brink, possibly could join the countdown or the conversation as we end the decade. Maybe if we did a actual decade list in another couple of years, might join the ranks or at least be in the conversation. So that's how we'll end it. Dan, anything we want to say before we get this thing rolling?
No, I mean, I guess the way I kind of... when we did the... actors list, I mentioned, like, I try to get actresses that kind of became their own or really became famous within the last 4 or 5 years. I did it similar with this one, though I think a little bit more of just really people who've really been rocking it the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, and I think that's something that kind of came up a little bit when we were doing the last one as far as some listener feedback and comments. Obviously, there are those like standard actors or actresses that have just been killing it for a long time. They might not, though, in this last 5 years time span, have had the same type of resume as maybe some of the other ones that might come up. So that might be why you don't hear maybe some of the more iconic names or maybe some of the more standard names that you would think of, because we're strictly looking at the 5-year period. I don't know. Brendan, did you have any criteria or things that you kind of considered as you were coming up with your list to help you narrow it down to 10?
No, yeah, I kind of did that exact same thing. I'm kind of glad you guys are bringing this up right now, because it was actually kind of difficult trying to be as objective as possible, but also trying to look at, who I think are my favorite performers, at least had a hell of a representation of this half-decade so far, because you're right, a lot of these actors could have been around for quite a long time, even way before this half-decade that we're focusing on, but which ones have had more of a prevalent stamp within that half-decade that we're focusing this episode on, which is really what I wanted to try and focus on. So they could have been around for a while, but where did that resurgence come, that representation, and does it show? And that's kind of what I focus mine on, too.
Yeah, and it's interesting as you kind of get your list and you start to narrow it down, because you think like certain people are probably like automatic, or you probably go into a project like this thinking you kind of have an idea of who you're going to pick. Mm-hmm. But as you start looking at those 5 years, it's like, I can't really put that person in there because it just doesn't stack up. Yeah. So it becomes an interesting thing where even myself, like I thought I knew, the majority of what would show up on my list, and ended up not quite being the case. There's probably 3 or 4 people that I wouldn't have expected that when I really looked at that 5-year period, I could not ignore it.
Mm-hmm,
so.
Mm-hmm.
Amanda, what about you? This is a different list for you. Do you have just all of your Hollywood crushes on here, or what are we going to see here?
You're going to see some of that, yeah, but I did my best to keep guys I thought were just hunky and didn't really do much as far as performances go, put them lower on my list rather than higher. There was a couple disappointments, people that I just couldn't put make it on my list because of the time period. I find that there wasn't as many good selections of movies to include them, but might be a little on the personal side for my list. Yeah.
All right. Dan, one last question before we get this thing rolling. Top 10 actors of the half-decade, harder or easier than when we did the top 10 actresses?
I guess it depends. I felt I guess with this, it was harder because I felt like I had more that missed the cut than with the actresses, which I don't know if that's because it is showing my own prejudice with when rating performances, but I felt doing the actors list I have more honorable mentions this time around than last.
I feel the exact same way. I think it was a little bit wider of a field. Obviously, the gender conversation when it comes to Hollywood is obvious. We don't need to get into it too much, but there's so many more male performers that have at least seems like been given the greater characters to play or more performances. And obviously, as we talk about 2015, seems like maybe it's swinging a little bit the other way, or at least for the time being. But yeah, it just seems like there's a lot more to kind of whittle down when we talk about the actors list. I'm not going to get too far into it because I don't want people coming after me. But we'll leave it at that. So let's kick this thing off. And Brendan, we'll start with you, the honored guest here. What is your number 10 top actor of the half-decade?
So for my number 10, I'm going with someone, he's kind of more of a supporting face. He's kind of, I guess what you can call, one of those quote-unquote character actors. You see his face pop around. He plays a lot of similar characters, but I think his stamp is really this decade so far, and I'm going with Ben Mendelsohn. I think this guy is a great actor. He's made some appearances in films like The Dark Knight Rises, Killing Them Softly, even The Place Beyond the Pines, and even recently, if we want to branch off into television, he was just recently nominated for a Golden Globe for the show Bloodline, which is a Netflix original that's streaming, and he was also in Slow West earlier this year. I think what really sealed the deal, though, is that he plays a lot of the similar types of quote-unquote bad guys. But recently he was in a film called Mississippi Grind, a film I didn't quite love, but it was nice to see him kind of change it up and play like a heartbroken man that shows that this guy's got some notes. And I think he's on an upward incline, which is why I feel like I had to include him. I think this guy's a great, kind of overlooked actor in many ways. I think he's very good.
I think he was really good in Mississippi Grind, especially, regardless of the movie. I'm probably the same with your viewpoint on the actual movie. But I think he did show a different side that we weren't used to seeing in him, and showed that he did have, like you said, more notes and kind of a more diversified toolbox to pull from.
I agree.
I'm in complete agreement. This would be my number 12. So I'm not far off from you, and I think the other one, too, would be his performance in Startup.
Yes, great choice.
Was really good. So I am 100% with you. He just missed my cut, but it was very hard for me to leave him off the list.
Great to hear.
I will hold off until later.
Okay.
I think he's a great pick. I just have learned to hate him so much from all the bad guy roles that he's been playing.
So good at it, though.
Yeah, he's even in Game of Thrones, and he's a jackass.
I forgot.
Yeah, and he was a complete lunatic in Black Sea earlier this year, or late last year, whenever you saw that film. So, all right, good pick. Way to start us off here. Amanda, let's have you go next. What is your number 10 pick?
Oh, shenanigans. Started off with Ryan Reynolds as my number 10. I think that he, I think part of my list is me seeing a potential in like an upswing, or something that I see in somebody and I want to see more of them. And I know that maybe some of the things that I've seen recently with Ryan Reynolds, like we said, Mississippi Grind, have kind of pulled me back to him, but I've always really liked him. And he might not have had a whole lot of great stuff, but say what you will, I had fun with R.I.P.D., just saying.
I'm sorry, what?
I had so much fun with that movie. Plus, he was in The Captive, Safe House. Green Lantern, I thought, was not the best. But he did it justice, I would say. And then his voice work here also does some stuff he's done, Turbo and The Croods, just some big names, and I think that he's a hunky, funny, and kind of dynamic guy. I think he can do both serious roles and definitely the comedic stuff.
You know, he's just so darn likable. I mean, I actually almost considered him, believe it or not. But what really held it off for me was, you know, let's wait until I see Deadpool first. And yeah, and that was really my big thing. But I guess I can just come out and say he was a pretty good honorable mention for me, though.
I think he gets the label unfairly a lot of, like, he plays the same role over and over again, which I don't think that's the case.
Nah.
I think he's has much more range, especially this year. Like, he's had, like, Selfless and Voices, and he's definitely is trying to expand his repertoire. But I'm super excited to see him in the Deadpool role. It's been, you know, the role he was born to play, really. So I've always enjoyed him since I remember seeing him on, like, Two Guys, a Girl, and the Pizza Place. So.
Yeah, and I think even his role in Mississippi Grind, I think, again, I'm bringing up the same movie. It wasn't a great movie, but him and Ben Mendelsohn really are the best two parts of that movie.
Agreed.
And the only reason to watch that film for all intents and purposes. So I can see, I think, like Dan, he gets a little bit of an unfair rap. I think he hasn't always had the best selection as far as which films he's decided to be in and which ones he hasn't.
He worked with Sandy B.
Is that good or bad?
He worked with my girl Sandy B. Proposal.
Anyway, but I just think he's made some bad choices along the way, and people kind of have kind of latched onto that and aren't able to see the actor and what he's capable of beyond that. So, interesting choice. All right, I will go next. My number 10 pick is going to be Domhnall Gleeson, and almost more so for the entire body. I mean, he has done a ton of films in the last 5 years. And I don't know, there's not many people that I was considering that had as large of a filmography. Obviously, as far as last year, we had Calvary, Frank, we had Unbroken, back a little bit longer, About Time, True Grit, obviously his roles in the Harry Potter films, which I think one of them does fall into that 5-year window. So it's just someone that I think fits the...
Did you say Domhnall Gleeson or Brendan Gleeson?
Domhnall.
He was not in Harry Potter. That's Brendan.
No.
Yeah, both of them were.
Both of them were.
Yeah, Domhnall was Bill Weasley, I think it was.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah. I just shattered your mind and your world.
I just blew my shit.
All British actors were required to be in Harry Potter at one point.
That's a requirement for being a British actor. Yeah.
Right. But what I was saying before is I think it fits Dan's criteria of someone who basically emerged onto the scene in that 5-year period. I don't think anybody really knew who he was too much prior to 2010. So I think it definitely fits that criteria, and I think he's just beginning, and we're going to see a lot more from him in the upcoming 3, 4, 5 years. So for me, I didn't expect him to be on my list when I started this project, but after looking at the resume and kind of narrowing things down, I couldn't keep him off, so he's my number 10.
Nice. I honestly forgot all about him. I almost put his father is an honorable mention for me, but yeah, he's certainly... I think he's really coming into his own recently too. Like, he's in a lot of stuff, and he Calvary last year. He really, really freaked me out in the best ways possible.
One of the best scenes in that movie.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen a couple of his films, so maybe that's why it's not even higher. But I haven't seen Anna Karenina or his performance in Never Let Me Go, or there's a film called Shadow Dancer. I'm not familiar with those, so I don't know if that would sway me one way or the other on him.
I really wanted to put him on my list. I just didn't realize.
If you would have remembered he was in Harry Potter,
you
would have put him on.
Put him on there. I'm really excited to see more from him. I recently saw About Time and absolutely loved that movie. Seriously fell in love with everything about it and him. He was so great in that. And then what did we see recently? Brooklyn. He was just in Brooklyn. I thought he was really... underused almost. I mean, he wasn't used that much, I guess. He was a smaller, I now want to say like an afterthought character because he was a bigger role than that, but I'm really excited to see more of him. I think he's great.
Yeah,
right.
He's got a lot of range too. His characters that he plays are kind of very unique in their own ways in all the films that he plays. There's a very good differentiation that he brings to all of his roles, which I really appreciate. So he's also a great honorable mention for me that almost made the top 10. He's a great pick.
All right. Dan, let's keep this train rolling. What's your number 10?
My number 10 is an actor who was around for a while, but he was mostly in TV, and I think I really got to really recognize him or take notice of him in 2010 in the movie Winter's Bone. I think he's kind of similar to that of Ben Mendelsohn being a strong character actor, and he's done a lot in the last 4 or 5 years, and that is John Hawkes. He, like I mentioned with Winter's Bone, his performance in that is just phenomenal. And then he did something like the Sessions a few years ago, which is the complete opposite of this guy, more of a lovable character, being able to portray a character that cannot move, and that's always a challenge for an actor. And I think he's got a range of talent. He's been in a lot of small parts too, from Lincoln, and as well as the Session, as I mentioned, the Sessions, Contagion. Like, he's a guy who can kind of steal the moment he's in. He only has like a really brief moment in Contagion, but it's one of my favorite moments in the movie. And I think he has a load of talent, and I think he can really take on anything. And I anytime you see his name in a movie, I get excited because I think like he tends to pick rather good films. I mean, he's been in, like, he was in Deadwood 2, and I didn't watch that when it came out, but watching it now, you get to see this guy. He has the ability to really fit any time period, which is kind of a hard thing for some actors.
I think with that pick, that's just somebody that it didn't even dawn on me to look at his resume and to consider him, so that's my fault. He kind of flew under my radar on that one.
I think the first thing I ever saw him in was, what was it, Blue Streak with Martin Lawrence. I think he died very early on, but I always remember that face. And then he was wonderful in Winter's Bone, and ever since then he has been making a lot of great imprints on a lot of great films this decade. What was the other one? I think, and I don't know if you mentioned this, Dan, the Sessions, I think he was in with Helen Hunt.
Yeah.
I think he should have gotten a Best Actor nomination for it. I don't even think he did. That was kind of a travesty, but that was a great performance.
Yeah, that was probably his best role to date, leading role wise. He was in Marcy, May, and Marlene as well. And but yeah, I think the Sessions was probably his best shot at getting a nomination. A lot of people thought he was going to, but it ended up not happening. But I do think hopefully in the future he'll get something, because I think he has given the performances. He just he's non-cause recognition.
Mm-hmm. All right, Brendan, that means it's back to you for your number 9 pick.
My number 9 might be a bit of a cliched choice, and I think, you talk to anyone about actors and their representation in this half-decade so far, a lot of people will talk about this person, but I got to talk about Bradley Cooper. Obviously he kind of gets, at first I feel like he was kind of typecast as like this goofy asshole that you just saw in a bunch of comedies, with Wedding Crashers, The Hangover, Wet Hot American Summer, but since then, he just does such a good job at playing like a likable asshole, if that's even possible. But you look at a lot of the work that he's done with David O. Russell. I like a lot of David O. Russell's films. Some of them I'm a bit hit or miss on, but Bradley Cooper always gives a very distinctive performance in those films, whether it be American Hustle or even Silver Linings Playbook, where I think he does a great job balancing likability, a jerk, but someone that has a lot of torment and a lot of problems. He's so relatable, and he's almost like a great representation of the everyday man. So that makes him kind of easy for someone like me to latch onto. When I see him on screen, I just instantly gratified towards him. And I think he does a good job at playing that. He plays to those strengths, and he represents it very well. But I do think he's got some very interesting notes in some of his other films that I think will continue to carry forth throughout the rest of this decade so far, that I'm really excited to see. So I got to talk about Bradley Cooper. I think he's great.
And I got to talk about Bradley Cooper too, but not yet. So, I will.
Yeah, I think he's kind of an actor I never took all that seriously until this half decade. Like, he's a guy who's like, oh, he's fine. Like, but with Silver Linings Playbook, and he's really been knocking it out of the park for sure. He was an honorable mention for me, but certainly if he's been nominated for Best Actor 3 years in a row now.
Yep.
So it's not many actors can claim that. So he certainly has been having a really great partnership with David O. Russell. At least kind of coming into his own and really showing that he's more than just like a romantic comedy actor. He's actually a legit actor. So.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also going to abstain my thoughts until later.
Oh, spoilers galore.
Well, Well, you can refrain from that one, but let us know what your thoughts are on who you have at number 9.
My number 9, I don't know how much flack I'm going to get for this one, is Mark Wahlberg. I think that he really, he might be another one of those that's come to be in a certain kind of movie. I think he's moved away from the more serious stuff and gotten, pretty heavily into the comedy, but I think he just works for me. And Two Guns, Pain and Gain, definitely The Other Guy. It's probably one of the most quotable movies for me. Even Ted. I had a lot of fun with Ted, and I think that he's another one he's like the likable jerk, just like Brendan was alluding to with Bradley Cooper. And I think, he has done some really awesome, serious dramatic roles. I think in the last half decade he was in The Fighter, too, with Christian Bale, and I just don't see him going anywhere.
Yeah, and also Lone Survivor and Date Night. Also, I like Mark Wahlberg. Transformers notwithstanding,
that doesn't
but that's not really his fault. But yeah, I think I think he's way better than people ever expected him to be.
He had a third nipple.
Okay.
I like there's the awkward silence when you said
I don't know how to respond to that.
This is a little Mark Wahlberg fun fact, just for the day.
Okay. You know too much about Mark Wahlberg.
You get seen in fear.
Okay.
Like literally, like you see it and you get fearful? Is that...
No, the movie Fear that he's in with Reese Witherspoon.
All right, next time I'm watching that film, I'll take a gander.
Yes, you will.
I gotta go rent Fear to see. Yeah, there you go.
Right. For my number 9, I'm going to get in trouble because people are going to say I don't have this individual high enough, so I apologize right up front. But my number 9 is The Batch, Benedict Cumberbatch. So, again, I expect that we'll hear from him at least on one or two other people's list a bit higher, but he has a pretty impressive resume with The Imitation Game, August Osage County, 12 Years a Slave, even Star Trek Into Darkness. I guess you could say his voice work in the Hobbit films.
Hey, he did some motion capture for that too. If you ever see the video,
okay.
It's hilarious.
Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, another one maybe that you would consider, but I think, again, someone that really burst onto the scene within the last 5-6 years. He fits that criteria of someone that didn't just come onto the scene, but like I said, burst onto the scene, and then all of a sudden has become, everybody's favorite guy, especially in different geek circles that we sometimes run around with. So Benedict Cumberbatch, I don't think you can deny his worthiness of being on the list. I think most people will probably say he should be higher than number 9, but for me, he's number 9.
Well, if you think you're going to get flack for having him at number 9, maybe I'll get flack by saying he's only an honorable mention for me.
There you go. So you're going to take the heat
I'll
off
take
me,
the heat off for you, yeah. But that's not anything negative on Benedict Cumberbatch, because I agree with everything you're saying. I guess just for me personally, I feel like I still need to see a little bit more from him to really consider him for top 10 material for a decade like this, because he's very good at kind of I guess recycling is not the right word, but he does a lot of this, like, I guess Sherlockian narcissism that he has with this. He has a certain tone that he likes to repeat a little bit every now and then. Not that that's a bad thing. He's very good at it. He has a charm, and he uses it. I want to see a little bit more notes out of him before I really consider him more heavily, but he's phenomenal at what he does, and he's so likable.
And I can definitely see that argument as well.
Yeah, I agree completely with you, Brendan. I have him at number 11. I think that I have seen some really cool stuff with him in it, but I definitely just want to see more to see what else he's got.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because even like in The Imitation Game, I feel like he had a lot of that tonality still. But I mean, like the ending of that film, I feel like there are some notes there that I haven't seen out of him yet. So he's slowly growing, though.
Yeah, I think if I was considering just actors and considering like his work in TV as well, I probably would have maybe decided putting it on the list. But similar, I guess, Kevin, you won't get any flack if people are yelling at us for having.
You're the one that has him on the list.
I'm the only one that has him, so all right, I'll get points for that, I think. So I guess he barely made a list in the first place. All honorable mentions for 3, and just at the number 9 spot for me. So. Direct your hate mail to all of us, I guess, on that one. Dan, what do you have at number 9?
Number 9, I have similar to Brendan. I think it's an actor that is people began taking seriously within the last few years. He was around for a long time. He was a Musketeer. He was within movies like Remember the Titans, but then he did a movie like Drive, and I think people started to look at him a little differently, and that, of course, is Ryan Gosling. He may be the only one on my list that can compete with the abs that are on Amanda's list at the moment in time.
Looks like he's photoshopped.
Exactly.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
But yeah, I really started similar, like I mentioned with Bradley Cooper, taking him seriously as an actor when he did things like his partnership with Nicholas Winding Refn. I like Only God Forgives. I know most people don't. His work in Place Beyond the Pines, Ides of March, which is not a great movie, but I think he's pretty solid in it. Even something like Crazy Stupid Love, I think he's phenomenal in that, showing he can be comedic as well and be kind of that romantic lead. And even Blue Valentine, as a movie I'm hitting a miss on, but I think too he does act. He acts the hell out of it as much as he can. So I think he has been he can be like that stoic kind of almost like Clint Eastwood type character in Drive that doesn't talk much, just action, but then be funny and charming in Crazy Stupid Love. So he does tend to have the same type of voice he's been using a lot, like you see it in the Gangster Squad. But I don't know. I think Ryan Gosling is trying to become more and more of an actor, and I think that's why I placed him at number 9 on my list.
I don't think I've ever seen a performance of his that I didn't like, though. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think I've ever seen something from him and been like, oh, he was terrible in that. Maybe I haven't seen all of his films, but again, someone that when they're showing up, I'm like, okay, I'm going to at least enjoy his performance, regardless of, like you said, some of the movies that maybe aren't super great, but he's good in them, and I think that's a sign of a good actor, obviously, that can kind of vault over the material at times and still perform. So I like that pick. It's not on my list, but I am a big fan of Ryan Gosling. And Amanda's shocked that he's not on my list, apparently. She just gave me the weirdest eyes.
Right. Couple with those curlers in her hair. I was like, I want to.
Yeah, I don't know. It felt like
I have a Little Mermaid sweater on. It's a whole deal going on over here.
All right, so that means it's time for everybody's number 8, and we'll start with you again, Brendan.
So my number 8, I am going with Joel Edgerton. I think this guy's great. Obviously, he's shown signs as a director now with the movie The Gift that came out, which I also thought he was great. He also gave a great performance in that film. He really creeped the hell out of me. But when you look at films like, Warrior and even recently Black Mass, I wasn't a huge fan of Black Mass itself, but I loved Joel in that film on its own. But I think he's making a very unique stamp for himself this year. And again, even if you look at a film like Exodus, Gods and Kings, which was such a chore to get through for me, but he gave it his all. This is someone that shows the type of dedication, and he's going to try and bring something to a film, even if the film itself is maybe mediocre at best. Actually, mediocre might be a generous thing to say about a movie like Exodus, Gods and Kings, but I can definitely see the passion that he was at least attempting and trying to give something worthwhile in that film, and he really takes his job seriously, and when you see it behind the camera now, and even him as a screenwriter, I think is also quite marvelous. So I guess maybe I'm kind of cheating by looking at him and how great he is behind the camera as well, but I think even on screen, this guy makes a very unique presence in every single one of his films, and he's very good at what he does. Joel Edgerton, my number 8.
He's someone that is definitely growing on me. I think maybe for the same reason that you were talking about Benedict Cumberbatch, though. For me, I just need to see a little bit more before I'm ready to put him on a list like this. Mm-hmm. But I can definitely see, especially if someone has seen all of his work and is behind him, I could see that argument. Because he is definitely someone that I've been impressed with recently.
Yeah, and you do make a great point. I guess, for me personally, what I have seen, even though there is some repetition in the tonality of his performances, I have such a bias as to what he brings to it. I think I just personally really love it, but you do make a great point.
I think that he's a super good choice. He flew a little bit under my radar, but the things that you brought up, or with the stuff that he's done, there's no denying that he's been really awesome in that aspect. Even, writing, directing, his performances and everything that he does, I think I'm really excited to see more of him, and The Gift super got me into him. I think he just sucked me in and creeped me the hell out royally. So I believe everything that he does. And then when we were watching Star Wars the other day, he is in that. He's
he's Uncle
brother.
Ben, Uncle Owen, yeah.
Oh yeah.
I just had to think about that for a
space
second.
for a second. I was like,
oh
what
yeah,
are you talking about?
Those are the prequels. I forgot those even existed. Okay, those. So yeah.
Yeah, I thought we were talking about Star Wars. I'm like, he was not in the 1940s.
This bitch. What is she talking about?
All right, Amanda, your number 8.
I've got the Coops, Bradley Cooper. I think we talked quite a bit about him, and I'm a little sad that he had to come in so low, but I think his work in American Sniper kind of showed a different side of him for me, too, the most recent. I didn't see Silver Linings Playbook until last month, and I was really unsure about how I felt about it the whole time, but I think he did a really awesome job. Even his voice work in Guardians, and The Place Beyond the Pines has, I saw that pretty recently too, and that movie blew me away. I was in complete love with that movie too, so he coming in at number 8.
I'm going to bounce off you because he's also my number 8, so...
Yes.
I'll agree with just about everything you said there. I even liked him in The Words, which I know a lot of people aren't very high on that film, but I liked him in that. Like you said, Guardians of the Galaxy, American Hustle, even his work in the Hangover films, take them for what they are, but you know, he still shows another side between that, something like that, and something like Silver Linings Playbook to something like Limitless, then having just like the fun character that he is, even if the movie's bad, and something like A-Team. He just shows that he can do a bunch of different things and do it well, and he's definitely someone that has really made a name for himself in the last 5 to 8 years, and I haven't seen much that he can't do. I mean, I'm not saying he's given that outside of maybe, I guess, what you would say in Silver Linings Playbook. That's the closest he's come to just giving that like trademark performance. I'd like to see something else like that again, or something that even elevates a little bit higher than that. But
even like Aloha from this year, I think he did really awesome.
And a lot of people weren't very high on that, but I still think he kind of elevated past the material on that one too. So I think it's a great pick from all of us. So I'll just pat all of ourselves on the back there for having 9 and 8 and 8. So I guess we're in agreement with that one.
I'll kick myself in the butt for never even mentioning Guardians of the Galaxy and American Sniper during my initial thoughts of him. Even American Sniper, while I wasn't blown away by that film, I loved his performance in that film. I thought it was wonderful. Really good.
All right, Dan, that means it's your turn for your number 8 pick.
My number 8 pick is... Usually when I went for people who had at least a number of good performances, and for my number 8, not that he doesn't have a number, but it's really a couple performances that really put him on the list here, and it's Michael Shannon, and mostly for his work in Take Shelter, Mud, and pretty much Iceman to even Man of Steel. Really Take Shelter, though, is kind of where I think I really started to appreciate him as an actor. He just can do Unhinged so well. And if you want to bring in TV, his work in Boardwalk Empire, and he can just be like a really ominous presence, a really kind of threatening force when he needs to be, which kind of made me sad that he was so misused in Man of Steel. He could have been so better than he was. But,
now we're going to get hate mail from the True Bromance guy.
So I'm a huge Michael Shannon fan, especially anything he does with Mike Nichols. Looking forward to, his more partnership with that. And even something like Mud, where he's only in there for, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 minutes, but it's such a difference compared to what his character in something like Take Shelter, where it's more of a likable kind of, uncle type of figure. So I think he's legitimately, if you're just going based upon acting talent, one of the best working today.
All I'll say is this. I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see that as a good choice. He's not going to be on my list, but if I was expanding this to maybe like top 20, he would probably come in, and that's more for like what you were saying. I don't doubt or question his acting ability. When I'm looking at like his resume, I guess maybe that's why I bumped him down a little bit, just because he didn't quite have the number of films that I'm seeing from some of the other people that did make my list. But like you said, if you're going just on pure acting ability, which maybe is how you should look at it, then he definitely deserves a spot in the top 10. All right, Brendan, that means it's your turn for number 7.
Number 7, I am going to go with Oscar Isaac. So we talked about Domhnall Gleeson a little bit before, who was also in a movie this year called Ex Machina. And also in that film, he shared the screen with Oscar Isaac, who I thought in many ways kind of stole the show. This guy, we talk about versatility, and we talked about a lot of the actors already prior on the bottom of our list so far, like mostly with like Bradley Cooper already. But Oscar Isaac, I think, is someone that does a great job showing that kind of versatility. He's someone that knows how to, he knows how to have fun on screen, but he also knows how to balance that kind of joy. You look at a film like Ex Machina with some kind of inner torment that's going on. And then you look at a film like Inside Llewyn Davis, which I know is kind of a polarizing film for some. It's a film that I really love. I'm a big fan of that film. But he's someone that is such a jerk in that film, but you kind of find a certain relatability to him. And he's someone that knows how to treat subtlety when it's needed, but then go over the top and have fun when it's needed. He knows how to make the right choices when it's right. So he's a very smart actor, and I don't think he gets enough credit in that regard, at least. So yeah, I'm a big fan.
Talk about them dance movies.
Oh gosh, that's one of my favorite scenes of the year. I love that song too. Oh
yeah.
God, yeah. But I'm a big fan of Oscar Isaac. He's my number 7.
Yeah, I definitely think. I guess I'll call out a technicality and say, because I consider it depends on if I'm going to consider A History of Violence 2015 or 2014. If I consider it 2014, then he probably would have made my list. But yeah, I've only seen a couple things from him, in the 2010 to 2014 time frame. Inside Llewyn Davis, I think, is actually one of the only films I saw before History of Violence and Ex Machina and some of the stuff, from this year. So I just couldn't put him on my list just based on numeric value, I guess.
Sure.
But I think for sure, especially towards the end when we're talking about people that will join the conversation, especially towards the end of the decade, I think, when you do this list in 4 years for the whole decade, he is almost a shoo-in based on the diversity and the chameleon aspect that he has.
Yeah, and especially after this, apparently some independent film comes out next week, and that he's also in might help skyrocket him. I'm not exactly sure if that'll happen, but I'm talking about Star Wars. But
I mean, I think someone would have to see that film in order for it to...
Yeah, who's going to see that film? Jeez.
It's only 140 hours away.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord.
That'll be an untrue statement by the time this airs, so
yeah,
I'll look silly then. But
Oscar Isaac was my number 12. I think he's another one of those that, like I said, just need to see a little bit more. He just didn't have enough out for me that I've seen to be able to put him on my top. But he's definitely got the potential to do some good and to stick around for a while.
All right. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, similar to Michael Shannon, I almost thought putting him on simply because of his performance in Inside Llewyn Davis, which I think is great. I'm right there with you, Brendan. I truly love that movie and own that soundtrack and still listen to it on repeat today. So, yeah, I think he's certainly talented. It's similar, if I was considering, it was more so I had 2 performances for him. Even though I like him in something like Sucker Punch, I didn't necessarily would count that as a great performance just because, there's not much for him to do there.
Yeah,
but I think as like an actor, there's no doubt he's shown that like he's gone from being someone I knew nothing about to someone I really look forward to anything he's doing.
All right, Amanda, that means it's your turn to reveal your number 7 pick.
Ooh, the big reveal. It's going to be JGL, Joseph Gordon-Levitt. I think that some really awesome stuff has come out of him lately. I don't know about this year with The Walk and all that. I'm disregarding everything that's happened this year because I haven't seen much of it. I think what really brought me onto the JGL train was Inception. His suits were so spot on. He was so classy and really was like a silent badass almost. He didn't have to say much, but you just knew that he was going to take care of business. I think plus like Looper, super fun sci-fi flick. Even Sin City. When did that come out this year? Is that not
the sequel did? Maybe last year.
Came out last year.
Okay. And then Don John, I think that getting into the romantic comedies and stuff like that, I didn't see 50-50. I think that there's a ton maybe that I haven't seen of his, but I just have fun with everything he's in, and if I see him involved in something, I'm at least intrigued, and I think that he's another one of those that has that staying power, and I don't think he's going to quit doing good stuff.
I love 50-50. I really suggest putting that on your list. I'm a big fan of that film.
That's with Seth Rogen, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and we own it, and you will watch it.
We own it?
Yeah. That was my number one film that year, so we will definitely be checking that out.
You will watch that.
We will watch that. For my next pick, I'm actually going to go with a different J name, and that would be Jake Gyllenhaal as my next pick. I don't think there's any. I don't even need to say anything, I don't think, for this, but Source Code, Prisoners, End of Watch, Nightcrawler, Enemy, obviously last year was a huge year for him, and I think he's just getting started, too. It's like he already had an impressive decade, and he's just getting warmed up, it feels like. So just the way he can completely transform himself and his body and his acting, I mean, look at going from the performance that he gives in something like Nightcrawler to how much he had to transform then to pull off the role in Southpaw, regardless of how you feel about that movie. Mm-hmm. Like, just a completely different person from a physical standpoint, from everything. Like, just completely changed himself. And he's someone that he gets a role, he holds nothing back. He dives into that role. He dissects it and spits out something that you wouldn't think would be the same person that's spitting out something that you saw just a year or 6 months prior. So I find him amazing, so that's why he's not next on my list.
I find him amazing.
He is. He's quickly becoming one of my favorite actors.
Yeah. I think he's one that I fell in love with like this year, like Southpaw and things like that kind of really brought him back for me. So I didn't find a spot for him on my list, but definitely a good choice.
I'm not saying anything.
All right.
I might have more to say. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Sounds good. Dan, what do you got next?
My number 7 is Tom Hiddleston, the guy who was basically Marvel's only good villain until this year with the Netflix series. Not only that, I mean, he's done all of his Avengers stuff, but he's done other legit acting as well. I love him in Deep Blue Sea. Even his small bit in War Horse, like, it's such a relief when he comes onto the scene. He's so charming in just like the brief amount of time he has in that movie. He is like the type of like old style Hollywood like kind of presence that you really don't see many actors today. Like he's an actor I think he could exist in any era. Like he could have existed back in the 50s and the 60s. He has that. I also love him in something like Midnight in Paris. Like he can be funny. He can be kind of this crazy villain in the Avengers films. And I think he's a guy that just likes performing. And again, like I think he is shown just a huge range, and I think he can take on a blockbuster film or like a small independent project. So he is my number 7. Yeah, that's where we're at now.
That's a great pick. That's actually my number 11. He was on my list and off my list and on my list and off my list. I just couldn't quite. When I was talking about my number 10 with Domhnall Gleeson and his filmography, there's nobody that competes with how many films Tom Hiddleston has somehow been in the last 5 years. I don't even know how someone can physically do that. Like, he has been in a ton of movies, a bunch that I haven't seen, but he has just been in a ton of films. So I agree. I think, like you said, he's one of the only good Marvel villains that we've gotten, but just everything else that he's done is just... He's always someone to kind of keep your eye on and someone that kind of draws you into the film. So I think that's a great pick.
I was really intrigued to see him in Only Lovers Left Alive that I checked out this year. And I think that might be one of the things that got me even more excited about Crimson Peak. But just Crimson Peak super turned me off of him and... anything I've ever seen him in, really. I think that it really did him bogus. Yeah, I was so upset with that movie that I just can't look at him the same way anymore.
Well, that's Guillermo del Toro's fault, then.
And I love Guillermo del Toro, so they burn me. They burn me a little bad.
All right, so not a big fan, apparently, of Tom Hiddleston all of a sudden. So that means it's time for Brendan's number 6.
Number 6, this is... I hope I don't get too much hate for having him this quote-unquote low, because this is someone that could easily top someone's list, but I'm going to go with Matthew McConaughey. I think when you talk about actors that have been around for a while that have really had such a quote-unquote resurgence, especially within this past decade. I mean, this guy basically is the definition of that. You look in the dictionary, you're going to see his name to talk about that. And even, someone like me, maybe kind of a guilty pleasure in many ways, movies like How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, Failure to Launch, all those terrible movies, I kind of like watching because he is just so freaking charming. I don't know what it is about him, but somehow he was able to finally start utilizing that charm in a way to bring really, I guess, well-grounded and heartbreaking performances within this half decade so far. Really kind of started, in my opinion, it started with The Lincoln Lawyer, or maybe even a little bit before. I forget if there was anything before that kind of helped to start kind of trigger that. But The Lincoln Lawyer he was great in. Then you had Dallas Buyers Club. He was fantastic in Mud. That's a very underrated film. And, obviously Interstellar, while I enjoyed the film Interstellar, I do have some problems with it. I can't deny that McConaughey is so good at representing, the father figure of that film, and he sells it beautifully and really helps. Basically, is the main reason why that film ever feels kind of well-grounded in its emotional resonance and within its deep sci-fi setting, and that merriment really comes together because of his performance, and he does a great job at that. So, yeah, definitely you define someone that's having such a comeback and really a great representation of an actor this decade so far. Matthew McConaughey defines that, and he's wonderful.
I agree.
I kind of figured I was going to get a lot of silence. Like, yeah, we have more to say later.
Amanda?
All right.
What is your number 6?
I had to be the one. My what?
Number 6.
Number 6? I think you said 7. I'm going to go with Leo DiCaprio. Maybe a little low. I don't know. But there's another Inception actor. I think that movie kind of is on my list a few times maybe here. The Great Gatsby, Django, Wolf of Wall Street. There's no denying what is that face, Kevin?
Nothing.
Jesus, he's got these pursed lips. I don't get it. I think that he's been around for a while. He's had a couple stinkers, but I think he's kind of one of those that are on the resurgent end too. And Revenant, let's see how that goes. He looks like he's gonna put some power behind that performance, but I think he's had a couple really fun roles, and even as outrageous as Monsieur Candy in Django. I think that he was one of my favorite characters, as much as you want to hate him in that. And I think that he is a good pick for my number 6 slot. I don't know where else I could put him. I had him originally a little lower and changed my mind and bumped him up at the end.
Yeah.
Nothing. No,
I guess I'll jump in. I didn't even consider him, but that's not to say I didn't think of him. I did think of him, but I personally, with DiCaprio, I think he's a great actor, but if I'm really focusing my criteria on actors that I feel like had a better representation of this half decade, I feel like DiCaprio's presence was really more of the past decade for me, which is why I felt like I had a harder time including him. I loved him in Django Unchained, even though I guess hate me now, I was not a fan of that film, like, at all. But I thought he was great in that film. I thought it was great, and in fact, I think one of his best performances was Shutter Island, which came out in 2010. I loved him in that. But I think he did have some stinkers this year, such as J. Edgar. Oh God, I hated that film, but
yeah, that was nice.
Yeah. So just me personally, I think as much as I love him, I think his representation was more ecstatic in the past decade, so it wasn't as fair for me to include for me.
And I think you can again direct your hate tweets to Optimus Solo, because he's not going to be on my list either. I just personally don't like Leonardo DiCaprio.
Bro, Titanic, I've been on board with
Titanic.
All right, I've been on board with that.
He's a good actor, but for me, every time I see a role of his, I see every single character he's ever played in that performance. Like, it just is the same. Not the same note. I don't want to say that, because he does give different performances and there is some diversity there, but certain things about the way he does things are identical in every single character of his, and I don't know how you can escape that, because that's just that's just who he is. But for some reason, it just turns me off. I agree, though. If you're just judging it on maybe he was in arguably 3 of the better movies, as Hyro informed me on Twitter, of the decade. If you take Django and Inception and Wolf of Wall Street, that's a pretty good trio of films to be in. But then if I balance that out with Great Gatsby, J. Edgar, and some of the other stuff that is not coming to my mind right away, it's just, it almost, I guess, cancels it out for me. I think he will get his first Oscar for The Revenant, maybe, or at least get one more time where he gets nominated and doesn't win. Mm-hmm. And I am looking forward to that film, regardless of what people might think. But I don't know. I just can never quite get on board with Leonardo DiCaprio, even though I know I am way in the minority on that
thanks
one.
for shitting all over him.
I guess I'll be with you, man. I don't
Everybody
have it on my
else
list, but I do think I don't see what you do, Kevin, because I like as much. Because I'm surprised by that, because I know you're a huge Denzel fan. I feel he's far more guilty of playing similar roles than Leo is.
I think it is. I think they're very similar in that respect, but for some reason I like the one that Denzel's giving it, and I don't like the get angry, yell thing that he does in almost every single one of his films.
Yeah, I don't...
Just like Denzel does the gum chewing thing.
Yeah, but for some reason that doesn't bother me. I don't know why. Like I said, it's completely a personal bias that is not logical, but it's something that hurts my interpretation of his acting, I guess.
And you know what hurts me? When you shit all over my person.
The only reason I didn't include him, because like I said, I was going for more people that kind of came into their own within the last 5 years, and he's been such a presence for since the 90s, really. So, I mean, yeah. I guess one performance where you can say, if you even go back to something like What's Eating Gilbert Grape, from that to something like, we talked about Django, or even Revolutionary Road, which is probably I think his issue, hopefully, is once he gets his Oscar, he can stop trying to get his Oscar. Because I think that's his
great way
issue.
to put it.
Yeah. So.
And I guess when I'm saying his range, I'm not necessarily talking about the stuff that he did prior. I'm talking about especially what I'm seeing in this last half decade. I think his character in The Great Gatsby is so similar to his character in J. Edgar, which is similar to his character in Wolf of Wall Street, which is similar to his character in Django Unchained. So I'm strictly talking about his 5 years that we're considering in this one. I think there have been performances prior to that, which I don't think are the same note, and I really like. Mm-hmm. It's just more when you take those 4 performances, there's so many similarities between all of them.
I can see that.
I think there was some internet meme or something that was literally saying that.
I put that up.
Yeah, you put that up.
One of him as Jack toasting with champagne in Titanic, and then him as Gatsby toasting with champagne.
Yeah. But
I will just say this: he should have won his Oscar already, and that was for What's Eating Gilbert Grape. I thought he was phenomenal in that. So.
Yeah, I think he's had a couple that could have won easily.
Yeah. Oh, well.
And Inception could be one of those, too. So.
And I just really love Inception. I think that's probably going to be pretty evident with my list.
All right. For my next pick, I am going to talk about one that's already been talked about a little bit, and that will be JGL. So we'll talk about Joseph Gordon-Levitt a little bit more, because that is my next pick on the list. And everything that Amanda said, and then show her 50-50, and I think he elevates a couple more spots, because like I said, that was my favorite film of that year. I think he is amazing in that. I think he's great in Inception, Looper, Don John. I just think, again, going back to what I said the criteria was for me and what a couple of you other guys have said, someone that really came onto the scene, and not just, he was someone that you knew before, obviously, but as far as legitimizing himself as a film actor in a serious way, I think this last 5 years has really done that for him. So I think that's why he climbed up a little bit more on my list, because I just really think he's owned these last 4 or 5 years to a certain extent, and again has a lot of stuff that he could do here in the next 4, 5, 6 years.
And that baby face, though.
Yeah, because he's 35 now, I think? He doesn't even look it.
20. He looks like yeah. So, Dan, I think that leaves with you. I can't talk.
Yeah, my number 6 is someone who has already been talked about, but it's someone I'm a huge fan of, and that is Ben Mendelsohn. Pretty much everything Brendan was saying, and what I love about Ben Mendelsohn, he does tend to play kind of evil characters, but he does even have within that a huge range. If you look like something like Startup, where he is this, though he's 5'5", he can walk around with an aura around him where like you can see why people would be scared of him. Or then something like Killing Me Softly, where he's just this grimy, like low down, like just disgusting human being. He's just so good at playing that type of role. In the Place Beyond the Pines as well. I don't know. I find him such a captivating figure as an actor. From when similar to Joel Edgerton, like I've met him in Ben Wilson and Animal Kingdom are phenomenal. Like that movie is just, you realize the acting talent in that is insane. So yeah, like I think I really gained new respect with him last year in Startup, and I was just like, wow, this guy can do much more than I ever really realized. And ever since then, I have yet to see Mississippi Grind. I'll probably check that out as well, but I'm a huge fan of him and everything he's done within the last few years. Because before 2010, I never even knew who he was, but now I think he's really showing up in even like Dark Knight Rises. I forgot he was even in that until it was like on TNT today. I'm like, oh yeah, he's in that. So he's in like he's one of those actors that's going to be in like everything. So
I still don't know who he played in Dark Knight.
He was I forget his role, but he worked with not Ra's al Ghul, but Bane's people. Like he was like the guy in Gotham that helped him out.
He was one of the people that was really kind of infiltrating Wayne Enterprises and trying to get Bruce Wayne out of the CEO board of directors or something like that. He was more on the economic side.
It's been a while. I haven't seen him.
And I haven't even seen his role in Killer Elite or Trespass. I don't know if those are good or bad films or if his roles are good, but I've already said, like I said, he was my number 12, so I can completely agree with it. Both of you guys putting him on your list. All right, that means we're on to the second half here. So starting the second half, that means we're into our top 5. Brennan, where do we start?
We start at my number 5 being what Dan had talked about already, Michael Shannon. So this is where I have Michael Shannon at. He kind of made a stamp with when we were talking about DiCaprio, we were talking about Revolutionary Road, and that film was getting such a lot of hype that it was, oh my God, it's DiCaprio and Winslet on screen together again. This is joyous. And the performer that no one ever knew of got nominated for that film, and rightfully so. He was so great in that. Obviously, I mean, that's 2008, so that's the previous decade. But ever since then, every time this guy is on screen, he just electrifies something. And even most recently, the film 99 Homes that he co-starred with Andrew Garfield in, a film that I definitely enjoyed, but I didn't quite love mostly because of the final act. But he was just nominated for a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor for that film, and I think rightfully so. I think he gives one of the better supporting acting performances of the year so far, and this guy just scares the living shit out of me. I mean, he every time he opens his mouth, it's like, oh my God, it's like shivers down my spine. It's like he's so condescending, but in the best acting way possible. You believe everything that comes out of this guy's mouth, and also major kudos to him because his hometown is Lexington, Kentucky, and I used to live there for a year and a half, so I guess I have some biases in that regard. But everything that you already talked about Michael Shannon, I completely agree with, so I won't echo too many of those thoughts. But I think this guy just really knows how to electrify the screen in the best way possible, but in the scariest way possible. I think he's fantastic.
He's a really good angry face. He's like he looks mad. It's like,
yeah.
I'm gonna walk.
It's like I'm not pissing that guy off. Yeah. Jeez, imagine if he had a boss like that. Oh my goodness.
Not good.
You'd never be late.
I quit in the first week.
All right, Amanda, what is your number 5?
Number 5, Ryan Gosling. That's where I'm putting this bad boy. I have been in love with him since the Disney days. Even Murder by Numbers with Sandy B again. That was one of my favorites that he's put out up until some things that I've seen of him lately. Like I said, The Place Beyond the Pines really blew me away. That movie was outrageous. It was amazing. And there was so much that happened that I did not see coming. Some really great performances. Only God Forgives. I have not seen Crazy Stupid Love either.
What? What? You're out.
I also own that.
I'm just really not huge on the chick flick thing.
No, you're watching that.
That's it has chick flick elements, but it's much better than that.
Don't worry, it's a perfect double feature, 50-50 and Crazy Stupid Love.
Oh, Lord, help me.
It kind of works, I guess.
But, I mean, he's such a beautiful man. I've seen him in... I've seen him in so much. I've never not liked him in anything. He was in a movie that I really liked too, Fracture. I think that might have been 2009 or 2008. I'm not really sure. But he's done some really awesome stuff, and I think he can be funny. He's charming. He's got this serious, scary side to him too. I think he's just a dynamic and amazing person, and I'm just that's my number 5.
All right. Before you go too far into your crush on Ryan Gosling, my number 5 has already been talked about, and that is Matthew McConaughey as well. Brendan already said most of what needs to be said. Interstellar, Dallas Buyers Club, Mud, even Wolf of Wall Street for those 2 seconds.
Yes.
I liked. I haven't seen the original Magic Mike, but he was in that, so I know, Amanda, you saw that. I don't know what kind of...
He was the most distracting part of that movie.
Gotcha. But even like what Brendan said early on, Lincoln Lawyer, that's something I liked him in. So he just has completely, again... For someone to be known for a certain type of film for so long and then successfully be able to break away from that, and not just for one film, but break away for that in film after film here in this last half decade or so, I am a huge fan of Matthew McConaughey. Anytime he is involved with a project, like even leading up to Interstellar, I think that's one of the reasons why I was so excited for that film, was because of his part in it, was because of his voiceover. Mm-hmm. And, his car commercials notwithstanding, I think...
Well, you don't want to drive a Lincoln?
I think he's easily one of my favorite actors, but also one of the best actors in the business right now. So Matthew McConaughey is my number 5.
Also ripped out of his mind, like Jesus. Ripped like Jesus.
I didn't know that was a thing.
That is a total saying.
Are those crickets I hear?
I don't know how to combat. I don't even know how to respond to that. Dan, take us to your number 5.
My number 5, someone's also already been talked about, and it's Jake Gyllenhaal. Honestly, like, his performance in Nightcrawler might be my favorite performance in the last 5 years, period. Just his transformation in that, like, I don't think he blinks that entire movie. He just looks. It's like watching like an alien trying to come down to Earth and wear human skin and interact. I don't know. It's such an amazing character that makes me enjoy that movie so much. And then you add things like Prisoners, which he's really solid in. Enemy, which again playing himself and like playing against himself, which is a challenge. You see a lot of people try it and fail, but I think it works well enough, and his characters are different enough that you do feel like they're separate people. And I don't know, like it's like like you mentioned already, Kevin. He's just an actor that has really kind of grown into his own. Like, he's done some other stuff, and he did, of course, like Jarhead and Brokeback Mountain, but right. I think he's becoming into his own leading man now, and really kind of going all out, like similar to that of like a Leonardo DiCaprio, in the sense of just really going for it in everything he's doing. So I've been just majorly impressed. And it's even something like End of Watch, which is a movie I had much like, I thought, oh, this will be an interesting cop movie, but I was like, a movie overall I thought was great, but I really enjoyed him in that as well. So
yeah, that was a movie that was just like, yeah, exactly like you said, oh, this will maybe be fun cop film or whatever, and then him and Michael Pena just like, bam, like, wow,
instant chemistry.
But I obviously agree, since he was on my list as well. So that means it is time for our number 4, starting with Brendan.
My number 4 also already been mentioned very recently, but this is where I put Ryan Gosling.
Ahead of mine?
Yeah, seriously. Believe it or not. And I think maybe, again, might be some biasness here, because when a couple months ago, when myself and JD, we did our Best of the Decade show where we talked about our favorite movies of the decade, at number 1, I put Drive. And that's still holding pretty strong as my favorite movie of the decade so far. And a lot of that comes down to Ryan Gosling's performance. And, it's kind of interesting with Ryan Gosling. The tonality of his performance and the kind of performance he gives, they're not terribly different, but somehow they are so different within the world of the film. And I think it's because he is one of those actors that is such a great gift in knowing how to act with his eyes. And he knows how to act with facial expressions. And he knows how to let that facial expression basically tell you everything that character is going through, which I think he did tremendously well in a movie like Drive, because he has little dialogue, but but he's a very complex character in that film, I feel. And I think a lot of that comes to just what he, visually gives us, just as far as facial expressions and eye contact and little simple things like that are able to tell you a lot. And it's riveting, and I think he's very good at that. And other films we mentioned, like he's very charming in Crazy Stupid Love and other movies like that. He's wonderful in a film like Blue Valentine, a film I really like but will never ever watch again because it made me feel like complete shit. But a great film in its own right. But yeah, he's wonderful for all the reasons we already talked about. So I'll say no more. Ryan Gosling.
And he can beat the crap out of some dudes in an elevator.
That's also true.
All right. Well, I'm the only idiot that didn't have Ryan Gosling on my list,
How
so
dare
I'm going to go back and redo my list, and I'll be with you guys in a couple minutes now. Amanda, what is your next pick?
Some more initials. RDJ, Robert Downey Jr. I mean, Marvel stuff aside, The Judge, absolutely amazing film. He was even in Due Date, and of course the Sherlock Holmes movies. The ones that fit in this time period would be The Game of Shadows. I think that he really is another one of those resurgence guys. He's been around now for a little while. I don't think that he puts out a ton of stuff. He might be a little bit choosy. Basically, I've only got, a few films here, but every time I see his name attached to anything, I am immediately on board. I don't care what it is, I want to see it. And I think he's shown us a few different sides of him. He's always that sarcastic, lovable asshole, which seems to be a theme of our list, but I think he definitely can do the drama, he can do the comedy, and I think that he can be serviceable.
I like RDJ. I guess similar to some of the actors we've talked about. I like him, but I feel like he's just been doing Tony Stark since 2008 for the most part. I would like to see him kind of maybe expand his repertoire a little bit more, or kind of do something that is beyond. His career overall. He's done a lot. I remember we played Charlie Chaplin or something like that. I like to see him do something like that again. But there's no doubt, as a person, I think he's rather fun and enjoyable, and I love him as Tony Stark.
He doesn't break character until the DVD commentary's done. University Tropic Thunder, he really doesn't.
Yeah.
I love RDJ. I think he's a lot of fun, and I too, if he's attached to something, I am going to be interested in it. That's why I wanted to see The Judge in the first place. I know a lot of people kind of hated on The Judge. For me, just it hit a personal chord because it was something that I somewhat experienced for myself in a way. So it was the closest a movie has come to making me cry in a long time. So that's just a personal bias with how that struck a chord with me. But yeah, I think he's a lot of fun and a great person and a great character that he plays. But I too would like to see just a little bit more from him and maybe a little bit more diversity, like Dan was talking about, which I think he has it in him. But at this point, he doesn't need to because he's made $8 billion so far.
He's banking on the formula right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
No love for my number 4.
Sorry, that's why I was afraid to talk. I was like, I hope I'm not the only one that thinks he's just doing the same performance. So
it just works for me. I just have a lot of fun with it.
He's very good at it. I'll give you that. Yeah, he definitely has a formula and he sticks with it. And obviously, it sells a lot of movie tickets because he's very bankable at this point. But he's very likable, like you're talking about. I have to give him credit for that too.
Yeah. All right, for my number 4, I'm not sure if anybody will have this on their list or not. I know some people are not big fans of his, so maybe I will get some rude remarks towards me, but I am a huge fan of his, and I think, too, diversity is something that this guy has in spades, and my number 4 is Jonah Hill. I think from his comedic aspect in something like This Is the End or the Jump Street films, he's been able to do voice work in How to Train Your Dragon and the Lego Movie. And then when you see his character in Wolf of Wall Street, there's a couple scenes involving Jonah Hill in Wolf of Wall Street that may be some of the funniest scenes of the last 5 years. I absolutely was dying during those scenes. Django Unchained, his scene is hilarious. And then you get a more serious side in something like Moneyball. I don't know if there's something that this guy can't do, besides maybe be taken serious by some of the public out there or some cinephiles, because I think he definitely deserves to be taken more seriously because he can do just about any type of role so far and make it something that is enjoyable to watch and believable. So I am a huge fan of Jonah Hill. I don't know where you guys sit on him, but I think he's definitely deserving to be in the conversation.
Yeah, within this criteria, if I were going down to maybe like a top 15, I would have more consideration for him. I guess it's really just in this point the people I would have put above him, I just maybe have more of a personal preference for. I think that's really the only thing that separates him from my top 10 more than anything else. But I do agree with you, and I did heavily consider him, and he was actually I would argue he was actually my favorite performance out of The Wolf of Wall Street. I thought he was an absolute riot in that film. And I think he does also a great job in a movie like This Is the End. A movie like that, yeah, I'm giving an acting performance credit for a film like that, where they did such a great job at making mockeries of themselves, and I think he did a great job at that as well. So he's got a lot of guts. So I'll give him that too.
I gained new respect for him in Moneyball. I remember seeing that, I'm like, oh wow, he can be more than just the super bad guy. And then in like we mentioned with Wolf of Wall Street, I guess I don't know. Maybe the one thing keeping him from my list would be just that really like almost like completely dynamic performance or something that was just. I feel like he's like something that was the next level. It's hard to really quantify, but looking at something like Jake Gyllenhaal, like Nightcrawler, not to put that as the requirement, just as something where I feel like I'm not seeing Jonah Hill anymore, or it's like something where I can see him really go out. I think he's come close, and I think he has more range than people gave him credit for, but I definitely don't disagree that he belongs in the conversation.
Right.
What about True Story? Was that from this year?
He was okay. Like I think
that was just a weird film altogether.
Yeah, he was just, I don't know. There was really not much there. The issues with that movie had nothing to do with him.
Right. Dan, that means it's time for your next pick.
It's, again, one that's already been talked about, so I won't say much. Number 5 for me is The McConaissance, Matthew McConaughey. And I mentioned with Jonah Hill, I gained new respect for him with Moneyball. With McConaughey, seeing him in Killer Joe, and just like...
Oh, yeah.
The infamous chicken scene, like that was just like, wow, he has gone a long way since his days and, Failure to Launch and all those great movies back in the day. But there's not many people who can accomplish what he did, really kind of restarting over and becoming who he is now, doing something like Killer Joe, doing something like Bernie, which he's pretty good in, and kind of really kind of reestablishes himself. And if you want to add in TV True Detective, so of course we've been talking about him forever, but he's really becoming from a joke actor. Putting him a name on a poster used to be a joke. It's like, oh, it's Matthew McConaughey. Now it's like, oh wow, it's Matthew McConaughey. His movie's going to be good. So kudos to him.
Yeah, absolutely agree. That means it's time to start the nitty gritty, getting into our top 3 choices. So, Brendan, what do you got at your number 3?
I won't spend too much time saying this person, talking about this person, because I feel like he's going to pop up a lot. Now, I think we're at the point now where we're going to start seeing a lot of repetition in our list, and that's good. That's great. Gives me less to talk about when I mentioned my number 3 is Tom Hardy. What else can you say about this guy? I mean, this guy. This guy's right here. I mean, we talk about transformations and someone that really, goes knee deep into his roles, but somehow it's him. But there are little nuances that he brings that brings a certain uniqueness to every performance, even whether it be a film like you look at Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, you look at a film where you can't understand a single word he says in The Dark Knight Rises. You have a film where in Inception where he's so goddamn charming in that film, and then recently Mad Max Fury Road, which I know a lot of people might argue he wasn't very much utilized in that film, that it was really more Furiosa's story than his, and I can definitely see that argument, but I think he does a good job creating or using subtlety to show a very broken man, and he has a lot of range, and he really takes commitment in his roles, and if any of you here have not seen the movie Bronson, oh, what a performance is that, and what a riot that is. And this guy's got notes. Tom Hardy. What else can be said? I'm sure we'll hear more about him in a little bit, so I'll rest my case.
Wait and see. Amanda, what is your... I'm not even giving anybody a chance to react. So, Amanda, what's your number 3?
Actually,
go ahead, Dan.
He's my number 3 as well, so I'll just basically...
Okay.
Yeah, so I have him at 3. It's pretty much everything you're saying. He can do no wrong, really. I mean, he can do anything that you put him in, from the warrior to, being this just kind of say-nothing, just man of action, to something where, he's just in a car for an hour and a half, and then that's the movie, but he makes it work. So it's just, it's just, I'm always impressed with his capabilities as an actor. So he picks, I think too, I love actors that challenge themselves and certainly try to go for new and different things. And it does seem like he's the type of actor that does that. He's always looking for something. It's like, okay, the next time I do a movie, I'm going to be playing identical twins because I'm Tom Hardy, and that's what I want to do.
Because why not? I can do it, yeah.
Exactly. So.
I'm glad you bring up Warrior and Locke, though, where those are 2 movies where your heart kind of breaks for his character, and he does a great job making you believe that. So even more range in that regard, too.
Yeah, definitely. Even something like Lawless, where he's more of a kind of like, it's hard to. There's almost like a comedic side, just like to his character, just in how little he speaks, and just he becomes a legend within just the framework of that character. So yeah, I mean, again,
you guys aren't leaving any films for me to talk about later on.
He was also in I Can Go for now.
Amanda, what's your number 3?
I've got Christoph Waltz coming in at number 3. I think that he's one that definitely broke onto the scene and made a name for himself in this last half-decade. Another one that if I see his name attached to it, I am definitely on board right away. Of course, Django, but even like Green Hornet, where he kind of dabbled into becoming a villain, and Horrible Bosses 2 too. He was pretty funny in that. I think that I'm excited to see a lot more of what he has. I know he's got a ton of stuff that's going to be coming out, but he's even another one that's done voice work. He did voice stuff for the movie Epic that came out a few years ago. His being so wildly underused in Spectre aside, I think that he definitely is one of those big name players now.
He's one of my favorite actors going too, and I think his performance in Django is probably, if we were doing top performances of the half decade, that probably would be on there. So I love it. It's not quite on my list, but I love Christoph Waltz, so I'm not going to say anything bad about him.
You don't have Christoph Waltz on your list at all?
No.
If Inglourious Basterds was 2010, he'd probably be number 1 on my list. But yeah, I mean, I love him.
The fact that one of those doesn't fit in the decade and one does hurts my ability to put him on the list.
He's a great actor, no doubt. I love him in Django. I guess like similar. I just looked for. He didn't have like another. If he had one more performance like that within the last 5 years, I probably would have put him here someplace. But I think for the most part, like he was in Carnage, which was okay. It was a much different movie, but there's no doubt the dude is legit when it comes to acting.
Super legit.
Super legit. All right, that means I guess it's my turn for number 3, and I'm going to say right up front that I think my number 3 is probably going to get the most questioning from people that might say it's not warranted, or maybe it's too much of just the Hollywood movie star type thing. But I think when you actually break down the films that he's been in the last 5 years and the diversity that he's had, he's, again, someone that always makes me interested in the film, even if he has had quite a bit of quite a few doozies amongst them as well. But my number 3 is actually Brad Pitt. And before everybody rolls their eyes too much at me picking Brad Pitt, Fury, absolutely phenomenal. I think in World War Z, he single-handedly pulled that whole movie off, which might not have worked with some other people involved in that. 12 Years a Slave, Killing Them Softly, Tree of Life, Moneyball, and that's just to name a few of the films he's been in. There's probably another 6 I could rattle off. So I think Brad Pitt is one of the best actors of the last 5 years. I don't know how everybody else feels about him, but I personally loved his performance in just about every single movie I named. So I have Brad Pitt. I
think Moneyball and Tree of Life might be the best 2 performances of his career. I wasn't the biggest fan of him in 12 Years a Slave, to be honest. Maybe the one reason I didn't consider him for my top 10, but the Tree of Life and Moneyball for sure, I think he really got to another level as an actor with those movies.
And I would honestly even put his performance in Fury up there too. I mean, I maybe I like that movie more than most people, but I thought he was fantastic in that. So, yeah, Brad Pitt is my number 3, which means we only have 2 more spots. I know a few people that we're going to hear about, but I'm still interested in a few spots that I don't know where they're going yet. So, Brendan, help me out. What's your number 2?
Okay, hopefully I can help you out a little bit. I won't spend too much time talking about this one because I think it was you, Dan, that was already talking about this individual. But number 2 for me is Jake Gyllenhaal. When we talk about people that can transform, that are willingly transform into their roles, I mean, no one does it better and more convincingly and more obviously than Gyllenhaal does. The level of commitment he shows, even in a film like a movie like Southpaw, like we talked about briefly, a film that, I thought it was fine. It's a fine boxing movie. But the dedication he brings to that, it's like this guy goes all out, even for a film like this. But he transforms himself so much. I'm not even going to talk about Nightcrawler because, Dan, I might even agree with you. It's probably one of the best performances of this entire decade so far. It's just the fact that they didn't even nominate him, I think, is one of the biggest Oscar crimes of the past 30 years. I think it's that bad. But I think he's so good in that, and just I don't think I need to say no more. Just the fact that he transforms himself so much, and the career that he's had, and the kind of roles that he balances and what he brings to it, and how much diversity he has to all these films is just, it's so uncanny. It's so uncanny. And Jake Gyllenhaal, my number 2. I've never seen anyone take the time to transform themselves in their roles like this. So, and I think he's great at it.
I agree, 100%. Amanda, your number 2.
I don't think I need to spend too much time on my number 2, Tom Hardy's. I mean, Lawless, Dark Knight, Warrior, Inception. He's.
I think it's become a rule that to be on this list, you had to appear in Inception.
On mine, yes. I said that. I already said that. It was a qualification. But he's just a powerhouse. I'm really excited to see Legend. I'm sad it's not playing Closer to Us yet. I think that his role in Inception definitely was an eye-opener for me to how awesome he was. He was in a Guy Ritchie film that I saw, I think my first...
Rock and Roller, right?
Rock and Roller?
Yeah. The real
Handsome
Rock
Bob,
and Roller.
yeah.
Handsome Bob, yeah. Gay Bob. And I think that he was super cool in that, too. And I'm excited to see some stuff he's got coming out.
That is also my number 2, so I will just continue the conversation. Everything that everybody else has already said, and talking about his performance and looking forward to seeing Legend, regardless of the mixed reviews that it's getting. I think also that's one of the main reasons why I'm looking forward to The Revenant, is to see Tom Hardy in that as well. So this guy is just... he doesn't have a lot of bad performances out there. Like, you can...
I fucking hated Locke, though. I hated that movie with a passion. Like that, it hurt me.
Did you hate his performance?
I didn't give a shit about his performance. I just wanted it to be over. I'm like, is he there yet? Is he there yet? So sick of it.
All right. Well, I did not have that same reaction to Locke, and I haven't disliked a single performance that I've seen of his. So,
Amanda, I think you should say those words to JD because he put that as number 1 of his favorite films from last year. So he'd love to hear you
Mother
say that.
of Pearl. God, why? I could not get through that. It was like literally, my body hurt from trying to get through this. I think that I got up like 1,000 times in the middle of it. I think we just on demand it, and I knew that it was going to be him in the car the whole time, so I was already going into it pissed off. Like, this was going to be super shitty, and it definitely lived up to as shitty as I thought it was going to be. And Kevin was like, oh, it's so great, and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I have no idea about that movie. I didn't like it.
I'm dying of heartburn right now.
We'll grant you your moment of insanity, and nobody's arguing about Tom Hardy, though. You guys both had him at number 3.
Yeah.
We both had him at number 2. So
yeah, honestly,
obviously,
my top 3 is kind of interchangeable, to be honest with you. It's like I could, if I did this again, probably I could rearrange them and be okay with that.
Well, then what is your number 2, Dan?
My number 2 is on here, really. When I said Nightcrawler, or Jake Gyllenhaal Nightcrawler might be my favorite performance, this guy maybe have given the only performances that I would put up to that, and that's Joaquin Phoenix, mainly for his work in Her and The Master. If you look at those 2 performances like next to one another, just how vastly different they are. In The Master, he's just this unhinged force of nature, just basically like id personified, where in her he's just kind of this, just guy, really sweet-minded, just with this idea of what he's trying to get out of a relationship, and the chemistry he's able to get out of someone who's not even there or not really even talking to, and then also add in performances in Inherent Vice and The Immigrant as well. So, but really it is those two performances that's making me put him up here this high. And I know he's an actor that's not, he's also in something I'm Still Here, which is I guess technically a documentary. I don't know.
It's a mockumentary, I think. More
yeah.
than anything else.
But I was not a biggest fan of that, but it was an experiment that trying to do something different. But again, I don't know.
I completely expected to have him on my list when I thought of the fact that we were doing this. Like, I was like, well, he's obviously going to be on my list, and The Immigrant, Her, The Master. But I guess it was just a quantity factor for me. I couldn't come up with enough films to warrant it, even if those are really good performances. And obviously I love Her. Dan and I have talked about Her in depth at one of our early episodes, and I love Joaquin Phoenix, but for some reason I couldn't put him there because of the number of films that I had seen in that 5-year period.
Yeah, it's kind of breaking my own rule, but it's mainly because I love those performances so much.
It was almost for me the Daniel Day-Lewis rule.
Yeah. And I'm kind of in that same boat with you, Kev, with Joaquin Phoenix. If I was really doing a full-on 100% true list, Joaquin Phoenix could actually have been almost in conversation to be my number one on a list like this.
Right.
But that's most like his performance in The Master, I think, is one of the best performances of this past decade so far. I think one of the main reason why I didn't include him and is mostly because when you look, I wanted to focus on actors that really showed their presence in this in this current half decade so far. And an actor like Joaquin Phoenix really started to show that stride very early on in the previous decade with Gladiator, and even in films like Signs and other things like that. People really looked out for this guy very early on. He just had to use a fake documentary to try and get his stride back up again.
Right.
So yeah. I guess it's kind of reasons like that, but if it was a true list without any of those anything backing that up in that regard, I probably would have put him at number one because I love this guy. Just those things, kind of like what you said, kind of hindered it for me.
I wasn't quite sure how much crossover we would have, or how much crossover maybe we wouldn't have in this list, but I find it interesting what I think is about to happen. So what I want to do is I just want to take a chance here. All I'm going to do is say your guys' name and one after the other, and I just want you to say the name of your number one.
I kind of knew you were going to do this, because I was thinking the exact same thing.
So, Brendan, what's your number one?
Michael Fassbender.
Amanda?
Michael Fassbender.
Dan?
Ashton Kutcher.
I was waiting for that.
Sorry. No, it is Michael Fassbender.
And that is my number one as well. I did not
expect
that. I knew he would be on all of our lists. I did not necessarily expect him to actually end up at number one on all of our lists. So, Brendan, I'll let you start, but why Michael Fassbender?
Well, first thing I thought you were going to do was have us all count down 3, 2, 1 and say it at the same time and just see if it all came together, which I thought would have been pretty interesting. But I kind of, when we got to our number 5 and number 4 picks, I was like, wow, it's like no one said him yet. Oh, we might all have him at number 1, but ever since I saw this guy in Inglourious Bastards, I was like, who is this guy? Who is this guy? This guy's got, we talk about charming when we look at a guy like Ryan Gosling. This guy, Michael Fassbender, really knows how to balance charm, heartbreak, obsession. I think that's really the biggest reason why, kind of going into some of the thematic elements that an actor can portray very well. Michael Fassbender is so good at portraying obsession and, ridicule and just all these things from a negative angle that just make me... somehow he's able to bring an essence of both heartbreak and anger and just all intertwined together. Like, even in a movie like 12 Years a Slave, who he arguably plays one of the greatest villains of this decade so far. And just somehow the way he plays it, at least me personally, I kind of felt bad for that guy because you almost felt a sense of pity for how someone could just really be like that. And for an actor to be able to get that balance like that it's absolutely astonishing. And the last thing I'll say, because I don't want to say too many films, because I'm sure you guys will have some other examples you want to name, but the fact he wasn't even nominated for the film Shame that year when I thought he gave the best performance of that year, let alone of this half decade so far, is another crime of the Academy. I thought that was one of his best performances, probably my favorite performance out of him so far. I thought he was wonderful in that film. He's great. He's great.
Yeah, Amanda, why was it enough to make him number one on your list?
I think Brendan was definitely on the right track with his charm factor. I don't even really think he's that attractive of a person, but his personality and everything that he puts out there engages you so much that I feel like you completely vest in his character no matter what it's in. I mean, Slow West, like you said, Inglourious Bastards, even though I guess we can't really count that, but he, even in X-Men, I think that he blows me away as Magneto. His fight scene in Haywire with
Gina Carano?
Yes, I always forget her name. I thought
that's for a good reason.
That was one of my favorite parts of that movie, and I was like, wow, this is such a cool scene. The only thing that I've seen of his that I wasn't a huge fan of came out this year, and that was Steve Jobs. But I think as soon as I hear his name, I want to know what's going on. I want to be a part of it.
And I think, too, like I had mentioned with Domhnall Gleeson and Tom Hiddleston, he does so many films. And it's almost, I don't know how I would have been able to see every single film he's been in, but it's on my list of things to do, because there's like half the films he did this last 5 years I haven't even seen yet. So like, if I'm already blown away, I don't even know what's going to happen when I see the rest of these films. But I don't know how many other people can go from playing in a superhero film like X-Men Days of Future Past, or like a sci-fi flick like Prometheus, regardless of if some people don't like that as much as others, to then pulling off, I know it doesn't count, but something like this year with a Shakespeare film in Macbeth, and then still give us like the villain like you're talking about in 12 Years a Slave.
Which I have not seen either.
I mean, maybe Patrick Stewart could do all that too, but outside of that, man, I don't know what he can't do. So it was an easy pick for me. I thought about Tom Hardy for a second, and then I was like, it's just got to be Michael Fassbender. So, Dan, I'll let you talk the rest of the way, since I know there's a few other films we could probably throw out there too.
Oh yeah, there's a lot. I mean, the thing is with him, he can be great in bad movies, like The Counselor, for example.
Oh, I didn't even write that up.
Yeah, for good reason. And the movie's not very good, but he is giving it his all, so much so you almost feel bad for him. It's like, man, he's giving this great performance, and the movie he's in is awful. Too bad for him. But like, I remember seeing him in Inglourious Bastards, but to be honest, the scene or the moment or the movie that really got me into Michael Fassbender, or kind of just like, okay, this guy is going to be not just a great actor but a huge star, was in X-Men not Days of Future Past, but First Class, and his relationship with Jason McAvoy, seeing this really great actors in a superhero film, I think really, to me, is why that's still my favorite Marvel movie. And he can be good in almost anything he does. Like in any type of film, like you said, he's doing a lot, and he'll do an X-Men movie, he'll do a Shakespeare film, he'll do a Western. He doesn't really seem to be all that picky when it comes to movies, but he's picking legitimately good stuff for the most part. I mean, he's been in some bad stuff, like he was in before he became really who he is now. But once he's becoming Michael Fassbender that we know and love, I think he's really kind of showing just some huge amount of gravitas and in everything he's doing. And I feel like there's not many actors that have the ability to have star power and be highly respected as an actor as well, and I think he's getting that. Like someone as Brad Pitt, I think, is known by a lot of people, but not necessarily respected as an actor. I think Michael Fassbender is, and I think, like, hopefully, in, like Brendan mentioned with Shame, he was snubbed at the Oscars. He luckily has gotten a nomination. I have not seen, well, I don't know how well he is in Macbeth, but, you know, being who he is and knowing it's Shakespeare, I can only assume that it's good. But, you know, he is not yet. He's got so much pressure on him on everything he does, and he doesn't disappoint as of yet. So him and Hardy really have gone back and forth this last 5 years or so, and really kind of become really the two, I think, actors that people respect the most. So.
Yeah. And some movies that he's been in the last 5 years that we haven't mentioned, most of them I haven't seen actually. Frank from last year, Fish Tank, Jane Eyre, Trance, A Dangerous Method, just to name a few. I mean, this dude...
Oh, Jane Eyre is actually really an underrated movie, I think. It's quite
Cary
good.
Fukunaga, another one of his films, another great director, too.
Yeah, and I just don't know how it's physically possible for some of these guys to do as many films as they do. They just eat, breathe, and live films. So
he even sings in Frank. He actually has
right.
he has a solid singing voice in his own genre, if you will.
All right, well, real quickly before we get into some honorable mention discussion, let's recap our top 10s. Brendan, go ahead and name off your 10 through 1.
All right, so 10 through 1, Ben Mendelsohn, then Bradley Cooper, Joel Edgerton, Oscar Isaac, Matthew McConaughey, Michael Shannon, Ryan Gosling, Tom Hardy, Jake Gyllenhaal, and number 1, Michael Fassbender.
I think I like Brendan's list. Can I just...
Oh, I love you too.
Number 10, I've got Ryan Reynolds. 9, Mark Wahlberg. 8, Bradley Cooper. 7, Joseph Gordon-Levitt. 6, Leonardo DiCaprio. 5, Ryan Gosling. 4, Robert Downey Jr. 3, Christoph Waltz. 2, Tom Hardy. And number 1, The Fassbender Effect.
Number 10 for me was Domhnall Gleeson. Number 9, Benedict Cumberbatch. Number 8, Bradley Cooper. 7, Jake Gyllenhaal. 6, Joseph Gordon-Levitt. 5, Matthew McConaughey. 4, Jonah Hill. 3, Brad Pitt. 2, Tom Hardy. And 1, Michael Fassbender. Dan?
10, I had John Hawkes. 9, Ryan Gosling. 8, Michael Shannon. 7, Tom Hiddleston. 6, Ben Mendelsohn. 5, Jake Gyllenhaal's. 4, Matthew McConaughey's. 3, Tom Hardy's. 2, Joaquin Phoenix. And a partridge in a Michael Fassbender tree.
I can make some really awful jokes about that.
Let's not go there. So just getting into some closing discussion here, in a way of, I guess you could use it as maybe who is your honorable mention, but you could also say maybe who is on the brink. Who is those actors that 3, 4, 5 years from now, when it comes to the end of the decade, might join these folks in part of the discussion. Amanda, I'll let you go first this time. Who are some people that you think are just about ready to join this conversation and make a name for themselves in the top 10 of the decade when it's over?
I don't know about all of that, but these are some of my faves, and a couple people that I'm really looking forward to seeing more. One, Domhnall Gleeson, I really wanted to put him on my list, and I didn't. Stop looking at my page.
Do not say that name that's written down on that sheet of paper.
I've got number 15. I've got Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
That one's fine. Do not say the next
number
one.
Number 14, Vin Diesel, my boy, Vin Diesel. 13, strictly on looks and dance moves alone, Channing Tatum. Number 12, Chris Hemsworth. I think that he's definitely one of my faves, but just hasn't put out enough quality stuff for me to put him on here, other than for looks. And then I've got Oscar Isaac and Benedict Cumberbatch.
All right. We'll ignore the Vin Diesel part.
Bro. I've never given up on him.
Obviously, the ones that just missed my list were Tom Hiddleston, like I mentioned, and Ben Mendelsohn, which both came up in the countdown. I think the two closest after that were actually Christian Bale and Chris Pratt. I think if you included this year, Chris Pratt's already in the conversation now for the rest of the decade. But just take Moneyball, Her, Zero Dark 30, the Lego movie, Guardians of the Galaxy, and now what he's done this year. That guy is obviously one of the it men right now in Hollywood. So at first I thought Christian Bale was a shoo-in. I didn't quite put him in. I do like Out of the Furnace, American Hustle, and The Fighter, and obviously The Dark Knight Rises. But I just didn't think he had quite as extensive enough of a resume to put him in. As far as people that I think are like on the brink for me, that's when I get into Oscar Isaac. I think he's definitely in the conversation here within a year or two with those rest of those guys. I think Miles Teller has a chance of joining that.
Yes.
I agree with Joaquin Phoenix being on the list. If he does a few more movies, I'll put him in. All right. David Oyelowo, I think he's on the brink there. Even someone like Bill Hader, maybe, or like Anthony Mackie, or if someone would tell this kid how to pick the right movies, like an Andrew Garfield. And if anybody could give some love to motion capture, can we get Andy Serkis some love here?
Seriously.
So those are kind of the ones that I had. Brendan, any that you were just missed or think are on the brink?
Yeah, a lot of them have already been mentioned. I'm glad you bring up Christian Bale because I was kind of in that same point there. I kind of feel like his representation was maybe more of like the late past decade, I guess, that I didn't really feel qualified as well as maybe some of the others. But I'm with you on all the other ones you talk about. I have both Gleasons, and I'm with you on Miles. Yeah, both Gleasons. I know, right? But I'm definitely with you on Miles Teller, and I'm glad you bring him up as someone that's, by the end of the decade, definitely someone we're going to be talking about. And also alongside him, Michael B. Jordan, I think, someone we're definitely going to be seeing more of. He definitely doesn't have, he has Creed recently, and then he had Fruitvale Station, but then he had a lot of kind of garbage around that. But the guy is a movie star.
What do you guys call it? Fantastic?
Fanforstic?
Yes.
We didn't coin that. We've heard that from other folks, but just the marketing of that film, it just makes it's Fanforstic. It just makes no sense. But I mean, you talked about Jonah Hill on your list already. I think he's up and coming. Even like some of the other ones within that company, Seth Rogen, who was great, and Steve Jobs. James Franco gave a wonderful performance in 127 Hours. I just wish I saw more of that to really consider him, but I think he has it in him. I agree with you on David Oyelowo. Hugh Jackman's another great actor. When you look at a movie like Prisoners, I thought he gave a wonderful performance there. I would love to see some more of him. And you know what? Well, Kevin, I know you weren't a huge fan of Birdman. I do think Michael Keaton's definitely on a bit of a resurgence as well, especially when you look at a film like Spotlight. I think he's definitely one to also consider him, definitely one, even at his age, one to take seriously now.
Dang it, I completely also missed two people that I should have mentioned in my honorable mentions. Idris Elba.
How did you miss Idris Elba? I'm actually shocked he's not on your fucking list.
I don't even know how he's not on my list, actually.
Or Chiwetel Ejiofor. He's another one I put in an honorable mention, too.
Absolutely. And the other one that I have now lost. Yeah, I'll let Dan say some stuff, and maybe it'll come back to me.
So a lot of ones you already mentioned. Looking at ones I feel like have a potential of kind of becoming huge stars or making a name for themselves. You guys mentioned Miles Teller. One also comes to mind is Ty Sheridan, who's been in Mud, Joe, Tree of Life. It was in like Boy Scouts Against Zombies or something this year. Hopefully he stops doing stuff like that and gets back with bigger directors. But I think he has a lot of raw talent. And his first three films it's quite impressive when you just look at the people he's been working with. Also, Jason Clarke. Yeah, Jason Clarke, who I liked a lot in Zero Dark 30, and he was also in Lawless. I think he has potential there. Daniel Bruhl, who's been around for a long time, but definitely with Rush and Men Most Wanted, The Fifth Estate, he's hopefully will get some more love. I mean, he was in Glorious Bastards as well. We talked about Oscar Isaac. Jude Law, I think, is also becoming a really great character actor. Like, he was there for a stint of time just trying to be this leading man, and it just wasn't working. But he's finding a really great niche now with really interesting characters, from Dom Hemingway to, to like Side Effects. I think he's really great in Side Effects as well. So I thought about James Franco, but I felt like he does a really great movie, then he does something really stupid. Like he didn't have the consistency for me. Also Mark Ruffalo.
I was just gonna say him too.
Yeah, in Foxcatcher, Infinity Polar Bear earlier this year, and we talked about Christian Bale already. But yeah, those were my.
And if Mark Ruffalo is not on your radar after you watch Spotlight, he will be.
Absolutely agree. Yeah, he was wonderful.
So amazing.
I forgot one. I had one more, and that's Mads Mikkelsen. He was in Hannibal, which is, this might be sacrilegious, but I think he's the best Hannibal actor, period. To be honest with you, and also he was great in The Hunt and Valhalla Rising and Salvation. So
The Hunt's a great movie. Love that film.
Another one that if he picked the right roles, maybe could join the conversation. It's almost been too hit or miss for me based on the movies he's been in, not on his performances, but Javier Bardem, I think, is definitely capable of doing it. If you ignored Jupiter Ascending, I think you could talk about Eddie Redmayne a little bit more. And
I'm actually really excited to see The Danish Girl.
Yeah, and Paul Dano also was one that just kind of popped in my head.
I didn't think about it.
Yeah. And Ed Redmayne's definitely one to consider as well, even though he doesn't have that many films to back it up yet. But I think by the time the end of the decade comes around, we'll definitely talk about him, and we'll forget about Jupiter Ascending.
All right. Anybody that we didn't get, should we just keep naming actors? Or
we're on that note. I did just think of one, and I guess maybe this might be more of like maybe a heartbreaking one to mention, more like an in-memory one. But, so maybe we got to talk a brief moment about Philip Seymour Hoffman. He definitely had more of his, well-known stature and resurgence in the previous decade, but a lot of that greatness even still carried forth in this, this half decade. Whether or not you like the last chapters of the Hunger Games films, I really enjoyed his presence in those films. And we talked about The Master with Joaquin Phoenix, but Philip Seymour Hoffman was almost just as good in that film, and definitely a talent we're going to miss.
Yeah, I agree with that. And if there was one kind of a closing thought, if there was one person that was on your list that you think maybe has reached their peak and you're not going to see as much maybe for the last 5 years, is there someone that has a possibility of dropping off of your list by the time the decade ends? Give you guys a second to look over your list. I guess mine would be an easy one for me, and I think that probably would be Brad Pitt, because I think he's capable of just disappearing from a certain, or just picking the wrong movies, or just putting out a bunch of kind of doozies out there. So I think there would be a chance of him falling off of my list personally. Outside of that, I have faith that most of them will probably stay in the conversation. I don't know. Amanda, anybody on your list that you think might fade away here?
I'm a little worried about RDJ. He's getting up there, a little old. He's getting a little bit more picky. He's got enough money. He's not going to probably be doing as much.
All right. What if like Mark Wahlberg or Ryan Gosling are unable to maintain their six packs? Will that affect their career?
If Ryan Gosling had a dad bod, I'd still be all over that.
All right, moving right along. Brendan,
watch Blue Valentine, you can see that. So there you go.
Oh yeah, he's got one in that later on.
I'm cool with it.
Brendan, anybody on your list that might be in jeopardy?
Yeah, I'd say even though he wasn't my number 10, because obviously the actual rankings of where they were on my list really is kind of meaningless here, because some of them lower on the list could end up moving up, right. But I think for me, Bradley Cooper is probably the one that's maybe most in jeopardy, because even though I really praise the kind of performances that he gives, I do maybe sometimes see a little bit of consistency in a lot of his performances that if I start continuing to see that consistency, I'll start to see less range in that maybe other actors will probably be able to demonstrate a little better as they continue to grow in their roles. So, again, no knock on Bradley Cooper. I think he's fantastic, but maybe a little bit too much consistency there that has him more in jeopardy than the others.
All right. And Dan, what about you? Anybody that you think might be in jeopardy?
Not necessarily in a talent-wise, maybe just getting good jobs, basically. With something like John Hawkes and Ben Mendelsohn, my worry would be that they get typecast and they find it difficult to get, characters that would, can John Hawkes get another character that is like The Sessions, or, get more roles of that nature? It's challenging when you're not like an A-list actor, that you tend to get typecast relatively easily. Other than that, nothing really comes to my mind. If Matthew McConaughey starts making bad decisions again, maybe. I don't know. But that's
all right.
Let's do How to Lose a Guy in 11 Days. So,
oh God, that hurt just thinking about.
But no, besides that, I think everyone that I picked, I felt like their trajectory is pointing up. So unless bad things happen, hopefully not.
Time will tell. Brendan, I didn't give you a chance to do it up front at the beginning of the show, so hopefully people are still listening, but how can people hear more about your opinions of films and actors and performances?
Well, you can follow me directly on Twitter at Brendan J. Cassidy, or if you want to listen to what myself and Mr. J.D. Duran have to offer, you can see us listen to us at In Session Film. Our website is InSessionFilm.com, or you can follow us on Twitter at In Session Film. You can also find us on all the other social media plugs, Facebook. We have a Google Plus page, Twitter as well, as I mentioned. We're also on the YouTubes. We try and upload our shows there as well. So, yeah, go check us out. We like to talk about new movies. And also, man, I really appreciate you having me on to keep on this great movie talk. Even though you and I don't really agree on everything, it's fun that we finally got some crossover for once. I appreciate you having me on, man.
Yeah, and eventually we'll be on, we'll converse about a movie that we disagree on an actual podcast, but that's never happened yet. So,
it's always on Twitter. It's always on Twitter.
Right. What other shows have you guys got coming up on In Session Film? What movies are you talking about, either in your most recent episode or the episode that you have coming up?
So this weekend we'll be talking about the latest from Ron Howard, In the Heart of the Sea, obviously the film that stars Chris Hemsworth, which we talked a little bit about in our actors list as an honorable mention purpose, where the story that was obviously what inspired Herman Melville Melville to write Moby Dick. So looking forward to talk about that film as well. We'll also be finishing off our Star Wars movie series as we review Return of the Jedi, all in preparation for what we're going to be talking about the following weekend, which is some, I guess, small space independent film that I guess some people might be excited to see. I'm not 100% sure what's really the deal, but I'm really excited for The Force Awakens. I mean, as you mentioned, Kev, it's like, probably by the time this airs, maybe like 100 hours until it comes out.
Yeah.
I don't know how long it takes to get this up.
I'll be at a different level of hysteria by then.
Yeah. Oh, God, how are we so close to this already? This is insane.
Yeah, for sure. And also, if you want to hear more Star Wars conversation, we also, on a different feed at GeekCast Radio Network, have been doing a series of Star Wars related podcasts. So we did our top 10 film characters. We've done our top 10 film moments. We did our top 10 film lines or quotes. And then the most recent one that is airing about the same time that this episode is airing is Dan and I went through and did what I thought was really interesting two top fives. And our first one were top 5 rules that we wanted people to follow in the Star Wars films going forward. So things that we didn't want to see happen again. And then we also did a top 5 ideas for stories or films that we would like to see in the future. So that should be live as you're listening to this. So Dan, how can people follow you on Twitter?
I am at Movie Revolt.
And Amanda?
Hard Candy Mandy, eyes, no eyes.
And mine, personal Twitter is at Optimus Solo. The show Twitter is at Cinema Geekcast. And I think that wraps it up. Brendan, thank you so much for being on. We look forward to another chance to talk to you again. Mm-hmm. And obviously, for those that have liked our top 10 half-decade list, we still have the coup de grace, I guess, still to come, because before the end of the year, we will give you our top films of the half-decade. So be looking out for that. Thanks a lot, Brendan.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
All right. Until next week, we will talk to you guys later.
I'm gonna get my doodle materials ready.
Oh, there's Amanda.
I was Facebooking, my bad.
I'll forgive you this time.
She's doing the media for us.
Yeah, I had to social media that shit.
Hey, you need a marketer.
Right?
That's me. I am my own social media director.
I didn't even know she was taking pictures of us as we were getting ready, so...
You
guys are lucky the camera's not on, because I have some curlers in my hair.
You and both.
Some Star Wars jammies.
Dan, a new look.
That's adorable.
I did not wake up like this, so I have to...
Oh, she's dying.
Oh, man, Dan. Killing it. That was savage.
You're not dying over there, are you? You okay?
No, I am living.
I'm living.
Good answer.
Well, now that we figured out what prep work we've done to get ourselves ready, fashion.
Please tell me you recording all of that. Please tell me.
Yeah.
I Instagrammed it. Yeah.
She's Instagramming my Star Wars pajama pants, and now I need to take a picture of her hair curlers and post it for the world to see.
Bro, it's in there. Coming from the guy that took a picture of me half sleeping, falling off the couch, and
I didn't know what you're talking about.
Become an internet craze.
Only a few people saw that, I'm sure.
Oh, Lord.
All right.